Backpacking, camping, fishing, day hikes, backcountry cooking, I'm sure you've seen it all before. But have you taken a loop through the winds with a couple of border collies? Howdy, my name's Dakota. I love frisbee, cows, and adventures. Join me and my sister as we take our human on a backpacking trip in the Wind River Mountains. This trip was a loop through an area on the southern portion of the Winds. We started from the Sweetwater Gap Trailhead, took the Sweetwater Gap Trail north, then the Mountain Sheep Pass over to Mountain Sheep Lake, Coon Lake, and Tayo Lakes. From there we went to Wind River Peak, down to Deep Lakes, and looped back through Ice Lakes to the trailhead. This trailhead was down good to excellent gravel roads until the last mile and a half, which was a rough, narrow, and rocky Forest Service road requiring decent clearance.
After a quick sniff around, we got saddled up and ready to head out. We have to carry some of our own stuff, but we make our human carry the rest. He brings a lot of dumb stuff, so what's a little extra weight in his pack anyways?
Right after the trailhead, the Sweetwater Gap Trail crosses the Larson Creek, but lucky for us, there was a brand new log bridge to cross on. The first couple of miles went through a recently burned area with dense regrowth and a ton of deadfall. We've heard that you typically need to navigate around some new downed trees on this stretch, but the trail crew had just been through, so we were able to sail right on through this section.
There were several small tributaries to the Sweetwater River that we needed to cross as we went up the trail, but all of them had rocks or logs we could cross on, and we didn't have to wade any of them along this stretch.
After several miles up the valley, we broke off the trail and started ascending the steep grassy mountainside, working our way up to Mountain Sheep Pass. At the base of the pass, we took time to rest, fill up on some water, and enjoy the stunning scenery.
Much of the lower part was still snow-covered, which was fine by my brother and me. We love snow and haven't seen any for months.
Taking one last breather before the top, we could see the cornice that sits in the pass, and we're trying to see if there was an open spot on the right like we heard typically blows out. As we got up close, we could see there was a moat that blew mostly open right up next to the rock wall. We scrambled our way up the talus alongside the snow and then moved over to the snow at the very top. On the other side, we saw a couple pieces of flint that had been napped. It was fun thinking about how they may have gotten there and the story they could tell if only they knew how to speak dog. Going down the north side from the pass was much more gradual and mostly grass covered.
We went down to Mountain Sheep Lake to fish and explore, but we camped up higher along the meadow above the lake. This put us above the thickest of the mosquitoes, and we liked the view better. It was hard to tell watching Dakota around camp that evening, but it was a pretty big day for us with heavy packs and not yet being acclimated.
The next day we packed up and headed for Coon Lake. There were game trails to follow most of the way, and we gradually descended along the steep hill flanking Mountain Sheep Lake. After crossing the outlet at Coon Lake, we went through some forested areas that soon opened up into a wide valley with a big meadow. We followed this open valley all the way to Coon Lake.
Several days we took extensive day hikes to fish, hit some scenic spots out of our way, or just went to explore some of the quieter areas few venture into. We noticed several nests melting out of the snow, which smelled like some sort of rodent's nests. Some were still partially in snow, exposing tunnels into the snow, and some completely melted free, but with the nests still intact. We're not sure who made these homes during the winter, but we would like to know. These weren't the only kinds of nests that we noticed while out hiking around. Many small unidentified birds had nests out in the grass as spring was in full force.
Most of our day hikes took us from lake to lake just to see what kind of fish they held, stopping along the way to soak up the sights. One day while out running around, I found the perfect chair made from a boulder, but my human quickly stole it from me and used it for a resting spot. One of the most scenic tarn lakes we got to see on this trip was Upper Teo. We hiked up there one evening and it most certainly didn't disappoint. Overall, we had a great time running around and exploring without our heavy packs on. But one of our favorite parts of the day is supper time, followed up by watching the shadows grow in the sunset.
The next day we moved camp near Teo so we could get a better look at our goal, Wind River Peak. By the time we got to Teo, a storm had just started to roll in. Our human put up the tent as quickly as he could, and it was just starting to sleet and rain as he finished up. The timing was great because not only did we not get wet, but we were due for a break. Nearly as quickly as the storm rolled in, the clouds broke up and the storm passed on by.
After the sun came back out, we walked over to the valley beside us and watched several cow elk with calves roam around down below. Along a grassy mountainside at a different location where a small herd of elk trotted off as we passed by, one came back behind us. I'm pretty sure she thought I was a coyote or some sort of predator that she needed to run off. But as I gave her a good old-fashioned border collie glare and reminded her that I'm well versed in dealing with mad mama cows 3 times her size, she peacefully retreated back to the herd. Some other highlights were ruffed grouse, mini pika, marmots, and some deer.
While we saw lots of bear signs, both bear-made and human-made, it wasn't until the last day, when we spent quite a bit of time in more forested areas, that we saw 4 bears. 3 of them were 2 cubs with their mom digging for grubs or something on the forest floor. After I asked them to let us through, the mom picked up her 2 cubs and ran up the mountainside.
After our 3rd camping location at Teo, we packed up and headed for Wind River Peak. This was a remarkably beautiful day, but also took a lot of energy. We went from 10,800 feet to 13,120 feet. It was very cool to watch the flora and landscape change as we ascended this section. Once we reached the ridge between Wind River Peak and Chimney Rock, we dropped our packs and turned for a detour up to the peak. The route to the top was 3/4 covered in snow, and the rest was boulder fields.
It was a mostly clear day, and all things considered not terribly windy when we reached the summit. It was really cool to see lots of the places we've been to on this trip, as well as many other trips, from a totally different vantage point. It was also cool how from this high up, and from the southern end, the winds appeared to go on forever to the north.
After the peak, we hiked back down to our packs and then continued on to Upper Deep Creek Lake. At this point, we'd been on a ton of snow, and it was starting to get to the consistency that it would stick to the hair between my paw pads and ball up, so I had to occasionally stop and chonk them out. Most of the hike down to Upper Deep Creek Lake was over the top of a large high mountain sloped plateau. We dropped into Upper Deep Creek Lake from a saddle separating it from Ridge Lakes. We found an elevated campsite with an excellent view of the lake. This site showed use from previous years, but like all of our previous campsites, we still felt a great sense of solitude as we had the whole lake to ourselves.
Another perk of early season is there's usually a place for our human to keep his Snickers from melting. After filtering water and eating supper, it was time to settle into bed early after a big day.
The next day, we packed up and turned back to the south. As we walked back across the beautiful winds, we couldn't help but start to replay all of the highlights. One of the biggest highlights was fishing. With my help, of course, my human caught some little brookies and rainbows, but the crown jewel were all the goldens. For as long as I can remember, my human has chased these brilliantly colored trout. Given how much Wyoming folks complain about California transplants, it might surprise you just how proud of these little guys they are. They are native to the Kern River system in the Sierra Nevadas in California, but they've been stocked throughout Wyoming for the better part of a century and can be found in abundance in many of the lakes across the winds. As the sun was falling, we made it back to the trailhead, exhausted, sore, and dirty, but our minds were already trying to decide where we'll head next.